Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I guess in India it's a bit later for you all than for me here in the Netherlands. So we've got a really exciting lecture today with Amit Rao on the Internet of Things security. And just before I hand over to him, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, just to remind you all for a couple of things. So firstly, don't forget to fill out the challenge survey. You should have gotten an email about it, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. It's really important that you fill this in, because if you don't, then you cannot take part in the challenge, which is the second half of the school. So it's really, really exciting part of the school. It's really interactive. So I really, really recommend fill out the survey. You list your preferences for which challenge to do, and you have around one more day to do it. So I really, really recommend. Second part, fill out and do your homework for the cyber resilience game. This is also really important. We have the next session 2, on Friday. So you still have a couple more days to do that, but it's really, really important that you do it. And the more people that join in, the more people that take part, the better the game will be. So just don't forget to do that. You can spend 5 minutes on it here and there. And you remember you don't have to do everything. Just a little bit is good as well. Finally, my last bit of housekeeping is just to remind you all that to get the certificate of attendance, you need to be here, be in these lectures for 75% of them, so 3/4 of the lectures. We've had some questions about this. You do have to be there for, a majority of the lecture. We get attendance reports and it says how long you've been in the lecture. So, if you're just here for 5 minutes and then go away again, it's a bit difficult for us to say you've been at the lecture. But I know the majority of you don't do that. So just the final thing before I introduce Amit. We've had some issues with the Q&A, I realize. So what I've done, I've turned on the chat for this session. Now, I trust you all not to spam it, so please keep the chat just for questions. If it does become a bit of a spam and there's too many messages, I will unfortunately have to switch it off again. So really, please, keep it professional. Yeah, and just use the chat for questions. And hopefully we can then solve this issue. So, with that being said, without further ado, let me introduce Amit Rao, who is an industry consultant leading market development at Device Authority, which is a global leader in zero trust IoT automation, which focuses on industrial, healthcare, and transportation. And he's got 25 years in experience in semiconductors and high-tech industries. So really, really, an expert, and I'm sure he's going to give an amazing lecture. I'm really excited for it myself. So over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Alexander. So good evening to all our participants from India, and very good afternoon to those joining us from Europe. At the outset, I'm grateful to the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, DSCI and CCOE for extending this invitation to share my insights today on the critical topic, the IoT security and current landscape and future outlook. So today, we're going to explore one of the most critical challenges in our increasingly connected world of IoT security. So we'll examine the current threats, real-world attack examples, regulatory framework standards, emerging technologies that will eventually shape the future of IoT security, right? So this is about a 40 minutes journey and will take us from understanding what makes IoT different from IT through real hacking incidents to understanding some cutting edge security solutions. So here's the agenda for today and what you can really expect over the next 40 minutes. First, I'll introduce some fundamental concepts around Internet of Things. What exactly is it? More importantly, how does it differ from IT and OT? OT is operational technology. And then we'll dive into the IoT attack surface, where and how systems can be compromised. We'll look at attack vectors, and I'll share a few real world incidents from the consumer, industrial, and automotive domains to give you a sense of what these threats look like in practice. And after that, we'll talk about the different domains of IoT security, things like hardware, software, radio communication, and lifecycle management. Basically, everything that needs to work together to keep the IoT system secure. And next, we'll move on to the latest standards and regulatory landscape, both regionally and globally, and how these developments are shaping the responsibilities of OEM operators and regulators. From there, if you look at it at the bottom, we're going to explore zero trust, look ahead at the future of IoT security, how technologies like blockchain, Cherry, AI, ML, and post-quantum cryptography are influencing security architectures, and how all of these are converging to define the next generation of secure IT system. Finally, we wrap up with a few practical takeaways for the industry, a quick future outlook, and then open it up for a brief Q&A Alexander spoke about at the end of the session. Yep. So let's jump in. What is IoT, right? It's a connected revolution. The Internet of Things represents a paradigm shift in how physical objects interact with the digital world. Now, the Internet of Things refer to network of physical devices embedded with sensors, part of the hardware, software, connectivity that really enables them to collect and exchange data. Now, these connected devices interact with each other and with cloud or edge systems to create intelligent automated environments. Now, unlike traditional IT systems, IoT encompasses everything that, for example, your smart refrigerator to industrial control system managing power grids, right? We're talking about 15 billion devices today, which will double in the next 5 years. Now, these devices collect data, make autonomous decisions, and control physical processes, which is precisely what makes their security so critical. So if you are interested to know more about the IoT architecture, there's document that I would highly recommend, which is the ISO IEC 30141, which is all about IoT reference architecture for a more in-depth understanding of how IoT works. So here's something crucial to understand. IoT is not just IT with some sensors attached, right? So the devices we are talking about are fundamentally different from laptops or servers we see in traditional IT systems. First, they are constrained devices. They run on small processors, often powered by batteries, low memory, can't handle heavy security software like an antivirus or constant updates, right? That's the challenge we have. Second, they are long lived. A typical IoT device is expected to run for anything between 10 to 20 years. Whereas if you look at IT assets, say, for example, your laptops are usually replaced in 3 to 5 years, right? For example, think of smart electricity meter in your home. Once installed, it may stay there for a decade or more untouched. Third, unlike IT systems that live in secure data centers, IoT devices are out there in the open. So you often see them hanging on factory walls, sitting in public spaces, operating in remote fields, all places where attackers can actually gain physical access to the hardware itself. And finally, there's this heterogeneity. IoT systems come from a wide mix of vendors using different protocols, chipsets, and communication standards, unlike the standardized IT environment, right? Where you can manage security in a very uniform way. So IoT security needs to adapt to this heterogeneity, this diversity, and there's no one size fits all approach. So when we think of IoT security, we have to consider all of these constraints: long life cycles, exposed environments, and fragmented ecosystem. And these are exactly the reasons why securing IoT is so much more complex than securing traditional IT systems. Now, Let's talk about where IoT meets the physical world, which is OT or operational technology. And operational technology is essentially the backbone of our critical infrastructure. The systems that keep our power plants running, our manufacturing lines moving, our water treatment facilities operational. And these are not just smart devices, they are mission critical systems where safety, uptime, and process continuity are everything. Now, in the IT world, we often think of in terms of CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And traditionally, confidentiality sits at the top of that list. We care about protecting data, keeping it private. But in the OT world, that order that I spoke about just flips. And here, availability comes first because a few minutes of downtime in a manufacturing line could actually mean millions in losses and even pose safety risk for operators and workers. Integrity is next, ensuring systems behave exactly as they are designed to. And confidentiality, which is still important, often takes a backseat. So what's changed in the recent year is the convergence of IT and OT, and this is where IoT comes in. So with Industry 4.0 and digital transformation, factories, power grids, industrial system are increasingly getting connected. And this using or leveraging IoT to gain efficiency, data insights, and remote management. But this also means that this once air gapped or once isolated OT systems are now part of a connected ecosystem. And this connectivity brings risk. So attackers who once targeted corporate IT networks can now pivot into OT environments. And we've seen incidents like the Colonial Pipeline attack or the Triton malware, and recently the Asahi Brewery, where the IT breaches led to real world operational impact, halting production, disrupting supply chains, and even threatening safety. So IoT becomes both like a bridge and a battleground, and it's enabling this incredible innovation and automation, but also expanding the attack surface into the very systems that run our world. So securing this convergence is uh, it actually requires not just the traditional cybersecurity, but a very deep understanding of industrial processes, safety systems, and resilience by design, right? And since I spoke about the IoT attack surface, let's deep dive into that. So let's talk about the IoT attack surface and what's and why actually it's fundamentally different from the traditional IT. So in IT, we usually deal with known boundaries, right? A few data centers here and there, managed endpoints, firewalls, we have the identity systems. But in IoT, the landscape actually explodes. Every single device that you have within the ecosystem becomes a potential entry point. And when you're talking about thousands or millions of them, the attack surface grows exponentially. Now let's start at the hardware level. Many IoT devices have exposed debug ports or interfaces that allow attackers to connect directly and extract firmware. Now, once that firmware is in wrong hand, as you're aware, it can be reversed engineered to uncover secrets like passwords, keys, even vulnerabilities that can be used at scale. And then there's the communication layer. IoT often relies on lightweight protocols like MQTT, and if you've heard of CoAP or Modbus, these protocols were never designed with modern security in mind, right? So some still transmit data in plain text without encryption or authentication, and that really means that an attacker sitting in the network can intercept or even manipulate traffic between this device and the cloud. And speaking of the cloud, the backend systems, right, that manage millions of connected devices have become massive targets. In an attacker scenario where the attacker compromises one of those systems, they can potentially push malicious updates to every connected device. And we've seen how such breaches can cascade across the entire ecosystem. Now, physical access, right, is another vector, which is another major difference in terms of how it works in IoT and IT. IoT devices are out there in the open, like I mentioned. You can see them in the fields, on walls, in retail shops, hospitals, now even in your vehicles. And unlike IT servers locked in data centers, these devices can be touched, tampered with, or replaced. That opens doors to hardware level attacks and cloning. And finally, the the most talked about topic these days, the supply chain, right? So IoT involves multiple vendors, chip makers, software providers, contract manufacturers, and a single weak link can introduce compromised components or malicious firmware before the device even reaches the end customer. And it's just not theory. Every single one of these attack vectors have been exploited in real world incidents, and some of that we'll talk about in a while. We've seen compromised baby monitors, hacked cars, industrial systems brought down, even medical devices manipulated, hospitals going through ransomware attacks, and uh, we'll talk about that in a while. So when we talk about IoT security, we've not just securing devices, we are securing this massive interconnected ecosystem that spans from the silicon to the cloud. And that's what makes IoT both powerful and profoundly challenging. Let's look at how hackers exploit IoT and get very specific. So how attackers actually compromise IoT device, that single most common weakness is weak or default credentials, right? So too many devices ship with a simple admin or a default password, and users never care to change them, end users, I mean. And that's exactly how the Mirai botnet was able to compromise hundreds of thousands of devices and turn them into a distributed attack platform. Next, many devices expose insecure network services, things like Telnet, FTP, sometimes running with unknown, unpatched vulnerabilities. And these services are essentially open doors to attackers who can scan for and walk through. Compounding the problem, many of these IoT devices lack any update mechanism. So even when researchers or vendors discover a vulnerability, there's no practical way to patch millions of deployed devices. Now that creates long-lived, unfixable holes, right? Now, data protection is another gap. So a surprising amount of this IoT traffic that we see still flows unencrypted or without proper authentication. That really means a man in the middle attack and message manipulation for anyone with a straightforward for anyone who has this network access. And finally, don't forget about the physical attacks, because these devices are often deployed in field. Attackers can get hands on this device, extract cryptographic keys from chips, installing hardware implants, or even swapping device entirely. Now, those attacks bypass many software controls entirely. Right? Put together, these simple issues, weak credential, insecure services, no updates, unencrypted data, and physical access create a very powerful attack chain. And the scary part is that each of this vector has been exploited in the wild. So when we design defenses, we have to fix these fundamentals first. Now let's look at some of the real world examples. And I would like to start with a very interesting hack called Stuxnet, which actually represents a watershed moment in cybersecurity history. The first cyber weapon to actually cause a physical destruction in real world. Now, this was discovered in 2010. This sophisticated worm targeted Iran's nuclear enrichment facility. And despite being air gapped with no internet connection, Stuxnet actually reached the facility through an infected USB drive, possibly via supply chain compromise. And what we understand of the incident is it specifically targeted a Siemens PLC, which was controlling centrifuges, right, manipulating their rotation speeds while reporting normal operations to the monitoring system. Now, the result, physical destruction of an estimated 10,000, I'm sorry, it was about, I think, 1,000 centrifuges, my apologies. And Stuxnet proved that the OT systems, even air-gapped ones, are really vulnerable, right? And that cyber attack can have kinetic effects. Now, this was likely a nation-state operations, showing that the sophistication, the kind of sophistication that is possible in a OT attack. The next one, again, a very interesting hack, and this probably is the most creative IoT attacks ever. And this happened in 2017. Attackers actually compromised a casino through its lobby aquarium. Yeah, that's right, a fish tank. So the aquarium had a smart thermostat connected to the network. And as you're aware, it monitors temperature and feeding for the fishes. So hackers compromised this device used to access the casino network, which was a lateral movement in the network, and found their way to a high roller database and exfiltrated about 10 gigabytes of sensitive customer data to a server in Finland. The casino never imagined their fish tank would be their weakest security link. Now, and this perfectly illustrates how any IoT device, no matter how innocuous, can become a beachhead for attackers. The other incident that I would like to pick up is from the consumer domain, the Ring camera, which are very popular on Amazon. The Ring camera incidents were particularly disturbing because they invaded the privacy of people's home. And this happened between 2019, 2020. Hundreds of Ring cameras were compromised through credential stuffing, which you are aware of. So attackers use the same username, password combination leaked from other breaches to access Ring accounts. And without a two-factor authentication, this was trivial, right? So hackers watched families in their homes, spoke to children through cameras, and even harassed users. So Ring initially blamed users for password reuse, but eventually made a two-factor authentication mandatory after public outcry and lawsuits. So this highlights the importance of security by default, not security as an option. The next example is widely spread Mirai, which is still existing in different variants. So it was a wake-up call that actually showed the world that IoT security can't be ignored. And this was in 2016, this malware automatically scanned the internet for IoT devices with default credentials using just, I believe, 61, if I'm not wrong, yeah, 61 common username password combination, and recruited them into a massive botnet. And at its peak, about 600,000 devices were infected. So the botnet launched devastating distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks, most notably against DIN DNS, which later cascaded into outages for major services like Netflix that time, Twitter, and Reddit. And what made it worse is that the creators actually released the source code in the open publicly, right? Which spawned dozens of variants that even persist today. So Mirai proved that insecure IoT devices can actually be weaponized at scale to take down major internet infrastructure. Now, on the right, you will see we're going to talk about a little on the world of little about the world of mobility. Now, mobility, if you really look at it, is also considered as part of critical infrastructure. 2015, security researchers demonstrated something terrifying, and they remotely hacked a Jeep Cherokee while a journalist was actually driving it on a highway. Now, through the Uconnect infotainment system, cellular connection, they gained control of the steering, brakes, transmission, and infotainment system. And through that, they could actually disable brakes, kill the engine, or even hijack steering. Now, this was all done. This wasn't theoretical. It was a real demonstration that led to Fiat Chrysler actually recalling about 1.4 million vehicles. Now, this attack proved that connected vehicles represent a massive attack surface where vulnerabilities can have life-threatening consequences. It catalyzed the entire automotive industry focus on cybersecurity, and it actually resulted into new standards and regulation, which we'll cover in subsequent slides. Let's shift our focus on some of the challenges that we have within the domain of IoT security, starting with hardware. And hardware security is really the foundation that everything else builds upon, right? So it's often overlooked, yet it's where some of the most damaging IoT breaches originate from. Many IoT devices ship with debug interfaces, like I mentioned earlier, GTAG or JTAG or UART ports, right? And they are left active or are physically accessible. For an attacker, this is like leaving the front door wide open. They can simply connect a probe, extract firmware, or even recover cryptographic secrets directly from the chip. Now, then there's the secure boot, or rather the lack of it, because without a secure boot process, the device has no way to verify whether the firmware being loaded is legitimate. That means an attacker could replace the original code with malicious firmware, and the device would run as if there was nothing wrong. Then comes the memory. Memory vulnerabilities are another major contributor to IoT hacks. Many devices use insecure memory architectures with secrets like encryption keys or passwords stored in plain readable memory. Now, attackers can dump this memory using physical access, side channel analysis, or even remote exploits. In constrained IoT hardware, memory protection features are often disabled or entirely missing, and you kind of making it easy to overwrite system memory, hijack processes, or even inject malicious code. In fact, study shows.
Sorry, I'm just going to quickly interrupt. I think there might be an issue with the PowerPoint. What slide are you on at the moment? Apologies.
Hardware security challenges. Do you see that?
Yes, I think that there is that there's been something happening. Maybe if you unshare and then share your screen again. I wonder if because we are still stuck on the an earlier slide. Apologies for this. Is that possible? Hello, Amit. I think we might be having some technical issues. Apologies about this. Yes, looks like it. No worries, we can be flexible. Let's see if Amit rejoins the call. Thank you all for your patience. Please just bear with. I'm sure we can fix this in a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, maybe think of some questions you might have for Amit. Don't forget, we now have the chat box open, but please don't spam. Just keep it for questions to Amit. So just while we wait for Amit to rejoin, I just see that there is a quick question from Aditi. So in terms of the game, it's open all the time at the moment, so you can sign into the game whenever you want. Maybe not a good idea to do it during the lecture, but yeah, maybe after this or when you have some free time, you can just log in with the same email that you've used for everything so far. You can log in and use this to play the game. And you have until Friday when the next lecture is. So it is for both to fill out the situation and the strategy, if you remember during the session, and then also to play the cards. So I've just gotten a message from Amit that he's having some issues, so he's going to quickly reboot the system. So it might be a minute or two, but no worries. Realized I was muted. So yeah, so we are just waiting for Amit to join back for the people who just joined. And yeah, for the so I just see that there's a quick question from Kanchi Singhal. So for the guidelines, if you go onto our YouTube channel, I will link it now quickly. We should have already a recording of the first session. So this is where we go through the rules of the game, I guess you could say, the guidelines, what you have to do. Here we go. I've just linked it into the chat now. So this is our YouTube channel, and if you look at IDCSS25 Cyber Game Session 1, you'll see there you can rewatch the game. Let me see. So one thing that I just see it as a question, yeah, check your spam. It does unfortunately sometimes go there. It also does take a few minutes. So sometimes it can take up to 5, maybe even sometimes 10 minutes. It's just because there's a lot of people. So yeah, I think it sometimes slows down the system a little bit. But yeah, check your spam as well. So if you miss classes, it's okay. We realize everyone has life going on. Just trying to attend as many classes as you can. That is the main thing. You have to remember to use the exact same email that you used while registering. So that can sometimes be the issue as well. No, you do not have to do all of the cards. Do as many as you can. There are 47 cards, I think. Try to do half, or the ones that you find most important. But you do not need to do all of them. So yes, so for the challenges, I can confirm that that there is going to be like a winner, so to speak, for each team. You will be divided into teams, and so for each challenge there will be one winner. So 5 winners in total, 5 winning teams. And there will be a prize. I'm not going to reveal it yet, but it will be revealed during the closing ceremony, where we also reveal the winner. So there's some real incentive to do it. And of course, the other, I guess, prize, I guess, is that you're working directly with these companies. So if you do a really good job, you do really stand out, whether it's to Microsoft or to NXP or to Unidir, which is an organization within the UN. Part of the reason why they do these challenges is to scout for talent as well.
Hey, Alexander.
Hi there, good to see you again.
My apologies to everyone. There was some major issues, so I had to reboot my system, but I'm back. And I also understood that maybe you were not able to see some of my slides.
I think we got stuck on them at one point. I think that might have been the issue. But I think maybe if we just try again, I'm sure it will be. Sure. We can keep going. The audio was fine, so it was just a visual issue.
No problem. Are you able to see my screen now? It says hardware security challenges.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what I'll do is I'll just start from here. I was on memory vulnerabilities. Am I audible? Okay. So I was talking about the memory vulnerabilities, and we've seen that it has been a major contributor to IoT hacks. And we were talking about the insecure memory architectures and how the attackers have been able to retrieve encryption keys, passwords stored in plain text, readable memory, and the adversaries actually dump this memory using physical access, side channel analysis, or even remote exploits, right? And speaking of side channels, these are particularly sneaky because attackers don't need to break any encryption here, right? In side channel, what they essentially do is they just measure the power consumption, timing, or electromagnetic emissions to really extract the cryptographic keys It's low tech, but extremely effective when devices aren't really hardened against it. Uh, the hardware supply chain is something that also adds a new dimension to the risk. Uh, we've seen counterfeit components or hardware trojans that can be inserted long before the devices actually reach the end customer, creating backdoors that even the manufacturers may not know about. And finally, physical tampering. For high value targets, attackers can literally decap the semiconductor chips, access memory layers directly, and read stored data under a microscope. So these are really sophisticated attacks, mostly nation sponsored, and but they're happening today, essentially in critical infrastructure and defense systems. So when we talk about IoT security, it's not just about the software patches or network firewalls. It is all about trusting the silicon itself to start with, right? And because if the hardware itself is compromised, everything that runs on top of it, no matter how secure, becomes vulnerable. Alexander, just to make sure, do you see my next slide on software security challenges?
Yes, I see it this time. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now let's talk about software, because this is where the majority of IoT vulnerabilities actually live. Unlike modern IT systems that get patched regularly, many IoT devices are built on very ancient code bases, if I may, and you'll be surprised we still find open source libraries from 1995s, early 2000s running inside these modern devices that you see today. Now, these libraries are often have had publicly documented exploits, which means attackers don't need to invent anything new. They just reuse these old attack scripts and still succeed. Now, part of the problem lies in the culture, and this culture I'm talking of the development culture, right? A lot of IoT manufacturers simply don't follow secure development practices. There's often no code review mechanisms, no penetration testing, and very little emphasis on security by design because it actually costs, right? So the pressure to release quickly to the market and cheaply means security in most of the cases becomes an afterthought. Then comes the cryptography, which should be the backbone of trust, but again, it's often its weakest link. We routinely find hard-coded encryption keys in firmware, meaning every device of that models shares these same secrets. Many products still use outdated algorithms, for example, MD5, or even store keys in plain text. So if one device is compromised, the attacker gets access to them all, right? Access control is another huge gap. Devices often lack proper user separation or privilege management, right? Allowing attackers to easily escalate privileges or take full control of the system. But perhaps the most serious issue of all is the lack of secure update mechanism, right? Some devices can't be updated at all, meaning vulnerability is discovered post deployment, stay forever. Now, others accept unsigned updates, which kind of lets an attacker inject malicious firmware as it comes from manufacturers. And remember, these IoT devices aren't replaced every few years like your laptops or phones, right? They often stay in the field for 10, 15, or even 20 years. So every software flaw we ship today could remain exploitable for decades. So when we talk about IoT software security, it's not just about writing clean code. It's about building mechanisms for trust, resilience, and long-term maintenance right from day one, from the day you start actually coding, right? Then comes the interesting bit about radio wireless security challenges. Not many talk about it because we've seen whenever we talk about IoT security with clients, they relate it to either hardware or software, but they actually miss out on this important piece of radio wireless vulnerability. So wireless communication opens an entirely new attack vector. Many IoT protocols like Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave have known vulnerabilities that have been documented in their implementation. And it's really common to see devices transmitting sensitive data completely unencrypted over Wi-Fi. So anyone who is familiar with a packet sniffer can actually read it. Replay attacks are very common, are particularly problematic for access control systems like garage door openers or even car key fobs. You would have seen a lot of news about, GLR cars, and how they've been hacked, and people have been able to actually, get away with these cars just using a car key fob. Here the attackers actually capture legitimate commands and replay them later, right? And jamming attacks. Now these can actually disable devices by flooding their frequency bands. And then you have these rogue access points that can perform man-in-the-middle attacks on devices connected to Wi-Fi. So radio security requires thinking about the physics of the medium, right? And here attackers don't need to actually touch your device to attack it. And the last bit, which is, I would say, a long-term security challenge, which is lifecycle management. Now, IoT security isn't a one-time event. It's a life cycle problem, right? It begins the moment a device is created and continues until long after it's retired. That is what we call security from cradle to grave, right? Let's start at the very beginning, the provisioning piece. Every device needs unique credential, not shared default username or password. Right? Yet we see devices shipped with the same admin combination across entire product lines. Now that's like giving every house in the neighborhood the same key, right? And next comes the deployment and onboarding. Now devices must securely register, get authenticated, and then get connected to the cloud platforms, right? Ideally using certificate-based identity rather than passwords. Now, managing this certificate at scale is not a small task, especially when you're deploying thousands of or millions of devices. Think connected vehicles, right? For example. Now, once these devices are in operations, the focus shifts to monitoring and patching. And here's the reality. How do you patch, say, 10,000 devices scattered across a city, which is embedded in lamppost or an elevator or a traffic signal? Many IoT devices lack bandwidth, power, mechanism for traditional updates. That's why a secure, automated, and remote update mechanism are really becoming mandatory in the new security standards. Yes, Alexander.
Sorry, I'm just seeing it's strange. It is working for me, but I think some of the students again cannot see the PowerPoint. Can I suggest maybe if I try sharing, because I have the PowerPoint with me as well.
Okay. Yeah,
Because I
sure.
think there might be some issues. Apologies about this.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, and I will share my screen instead. So, should be able to see my screen now. Although I have a feeling that unfortunately Amit is has left us again. Unfortunately, yes, yeah, there we go. So that is very unfortunate. Unfortunately, but again, we can see maybe what we can do is have him rejoin. I am aware that we only have a couple of minutes left, but uh,
Alexander, I'm back.
Hi there. Yes, great, great. I think it's
there's some technical issue because it doesn't
I think
let
so.
me get into the Teams again. So I have to again open the application. My apologies for that, but
No
this is
worries, no
strange.
worries.
Okay.
Yes, slightly. But are
No,
you
no, thanks.
able to see my screen? It's now on long-term security challenge.
Yeah. Is
Yes.
everybody able to see the screen now? Your screen? I'm able to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay,
I
we'll
think so.
move
Yes,
forward.
correct.
So while I covered most of what's there on the lifecycle management, I think one of the important points that I missed out earlier was the decommissioning. I think it got disconnected then. Um, so this decommissioning is really a phase where most people forget, right? Because when the devices are replaced or resold, their data must be securely erased and their credential revoked. Yet it's common to find used devices. And for example, if you go to eBay, right, you still find a used connected device which still holds the Wi-Fi passwords, right? Encryption keys, user data from previous owner. Now, that's not just being careless, it's actually a compliance risk. And the real challenges emerge at the end of life. Now, IoT devices often outlive vendor support. Now, unlike laptops that get refreshed every 3 to 5 years, imagine the smart thermostat or the industrial sensors or even your connected car have will stay in use on field for 10, 15, or even 20 years, right? I mean, in India, we run the car for almost like 10 to 15 years now. So the question becomes, who provides security updates, say in year 12, when the manufacturer has moved on, right? Or even the manufacturer is there, but there's no support available for your connected device. And this is exactly why new international standards and regulation, for example, ISO IEC 27402, the European Union Cybersecurity Resilience Act, the UK Product Security and Telecom Infrastructure Regulation, are now really emphasizing on lifecycle management as a legal obligation, right? And perhaps the most important shift we've seen is liability. Now, what do you mean by that? The responsibility of securing devices and protecting data is moving away from consumers and squarely onto manufacturers and service providers. Now, regulators are making it very clear. Now, if your device can connect to the internet, you're accountable for its security, not the end user, right? And from the moment it's built to the moment it's getting decommissioned or retired. So lifecycle management isn't just about the best practices anymore. It's becoming a law, a regulation, and it's what separates a secure IoT ecosystem from a vulnerable one. So if you can just move on to the next one, which is on standards. Great, thank you. Now, let's examine the key standards defining IoT security implementation. Now, these are voluntary frameworks, but increasingly becoming a de facto requirement through regulatory references and contracts, right? So, ISO 27400, you guys should look out, I mean, read through what it entails. It provides actually an overarching IoT security and privacy framework for the entire ecosystem as a whole, right? And then there's 27402, which provides implementation guidance from a device perspective. Now, these are the first two global standards that have been rolled out. And these are your enterprise IoT foundation or core baseline across any industry. Then comes the 8CEN 303645, which is the most influential consumer IoT standard. It defines about 13 practical testable security provisioning, no default passwords, secure updates, minimize attack surfaces. This literally shaped legislations globally, right? It is technical foundation for, say, UK PSTI, the Singapore labeling scheme, and now also being referenced throughout the European Union Cybersecurity Resilience Act. Now there are certain domain specific standards as well. Let's look at automotive. ISO 21434 covers cybersecurity throughout the vehicle life cycle, aligning perfectly with new regulation, which is called WP29. which has R155, 156. So the R155 is the CSMS. For automotive supplier, this is rapidly becoming mandatory, right? And for folks in India, we will see a rollout of ARAI AIS 189190, which is replicating the R155, 156 regulations in most of the European countries. We have then ISO 15118, which secures vehicle to grid communication. Now, it ensures mutual authentication between the EV and the chargers using PKI certificate, protecting the electrical grid from vehicle-based attacks. Its plug-and charge feature is really becoming a industry standard. And then, of course, I think most of you would have heard of the IEC 62443, which is also ISO standard now. And it's a definitive standard for industrial automation and control system. It kind of defines security levels from 1 to 4 and framework for network segmentation. So working with SCADA or industrial controls, IEC 62443 is essential. And again, folks in India, this has actually being standardized by Bureau of India Standards, right, for industrial controls. Finally, ISO 30141, which I mentioned earlier, provides for IoT reference architecture for secure interoperability. So these standards are complementary, not really competing. Some of them are horizontal, some of them are domain vertical. But yeah, this is something that multiple industries and sectors and markets will start implementing. So can we move on to the next one, which is about regulatory frameworks? Great. Now let's look at the mandatory regulations and how it's impacting the IoT security. Sorry, I just saw a chat with this. I hope, can you do it full screen, Alexander? I think some folks are still having a problem viewing the slide. Okay, we'll go on with this. So, yeah. So talking about regulations, right? So the IoT security regulatory landscape has really transformed dramatically. What was optional is now legally required, and we've seen this paradigm shift over the past 2-3 years. One of the major implications has been for automotive industry. I just spoke about the R55156, which makes cybersecurity a vehicle type approval requirement, right? So R55 mandates cybersecurity management system covering the entire vehicle life cycle, and R156 requires secure software update management. So no compliance means no type approval. So you cannot actually sell in, say, European Union, Japan, Korea, Australia, and a few other regions, right? So enforced since 2024. So it started last year for all new vehicle types, and this year for all vehicles in these regions, right? So, and India will have it starting next year. So the European Union Cybersecurity Resilience Act is probably the most comprehensive IoT legislation globally. It covers all products with digital elements, right? And what is the definition of digital element? So if you pick up a product, memory, chip, software, everything is considered as a digital element. And all digital elements sold in European Union. So it mandates security by default, 5+ year update, vulnerability handling, and CE marking, right? Now, they also have penalties, by the way. So we're talking something like a 15 million euros or 2.5% of the global turnover. And that's huge, right? So there's going to be a phased implementation through 2027. And we see manufacturers already preparing for it now. Another interesting one is the NIS2, which is to do with critical infrastructure. So this NIS2 is, expands significantly on NIS1, and it covers essentially 18 sectors, critical ones like energy, mobility, healthcare, water. And what it requires really is 24-hour incident reporting, supply chain security with personal management liability. That's a critical bit, right? So people at CXO level might just lose their jobs, right? That's the kind of liability they put. And European member states are now implementing that now nationally, right? Another interesting one, first of its kind, UK product security telecom infrastructure that came into force in April 2024. And they just have three simple but very powerful requirements: no default passwords, public vulnerability disclosure policy, and transparent update periods, right? So again, there are penalties, about 4% of turnover and about 10 million pounds, if I'm not mistaken. These three requirements address the most common attack vector. So the idea is to really thwart large scale attacks. And then, of course, we had the European Union Radio Equipment Directive, the California SB 327, which was US first state IoT law. But the critical points here, the regulation really converge on similar requirements if you look at it. If you heard what I said, security by default, life cycle management, transparency, accountability. So these are, some of that effects on the products that are now getting sold globally. And the global landscape is also unifying around this core security principle, right? Yeah, so we move on to the next one. Yeah, so this is critical, and you would have heard a lot about zero trust in the context of IoT. I'm going to talk about that in the context of IoT. So traditional perimeter-based security, which is essentially the firewalls, right, simply don't work for IoT. You can't build a castle wall around millions of devices which are deployed globally out there on the road, or like I said, on the pole, or in the restaurant, or in a hospital, right? This is where zero trust becomes very essential. So the core principle is simple: never trust, always verify. So assume every network is hostile and every device is potentially compromised. That is what the fundamentals of zero trust are. So for IoT specifically, this means several things. So the first thing is strong device identity using certificate, not just passwords, right? Second, network micro segmentation is very, very important, right? So that there is no literal movements. So if you heard me on the casino hack, this is exactly what has happened. So you need to have a network micro segmentation in place. Third, continuous authentication monitoring of device behavior, right? And we see a lot of AI/ML tools doing that now in the IoT domain. Fourth, strict least privilege access principles. So when implemented properly, zero trust really contains breaches. And what it does is it dramatically reduces the attack surface that we spoke about in the beginning and enables secure remote access to IoT device, which is probably the most important thing when we talk about chip to cloud, right? Yeah. Can we move on to the next one? I won't take much time on the future outlook because I have about four line of technologies that I'll be speaking about. So I'll probably take a minute each in the interest of time. So blockchain actually offers a very interesting solution specifically for IoT security and the challenges it holds. Immutability, for sure, because it provides for excellent audit logs that cannot be tampered with. Can be used for highly regulated industries. Then there's the decentralized identity management, which is actually being looked at for solving the certification authority problem at scale, right? Today, certification authority is a single point of failure. Now, how do you mitigate that risk? By having a decentralized identity management. Supply chain verification using blockchain. This can be used for provenance, which is how do you prove the origin and handling of the components? Very, very important when it comes to supply chain. And the last one I would probably put as something to do with firmware integrity verification, which can leverage blockchain to ensure updates haven't been tampered with, right? Now, having said that, blockchains have a limitation. And that's why you don't really see blockchains ramping up when it comes to IoT security, which is it cannot really scale easily to billions of devices, and also consider the energy consumption, which is a big concern. Yeah. Can we move on to the next one? This is one of the most promising future technologies. It was actually developed by Cambridge University. Cherry stands for Capability Hardware Enhanced Risk Instruction. This is revolutionary because it addresses a very fundamental problem. Approximately 70% of critical security vulnerabilities in IoT are actually related to memory safety issues. We're talking buffer overflows. We are talking of use after free kind of bugs. We are talking pointer manipulation. Now these bugs, are being exploited by attackers in IoT devices. Now Cherry solves this at the hardware level by implementing certain capabilities, which are, essentially unforgeable, unclonable tokens that grant specific bound access to bounded access to certain memory spaces. So unlike traditional pointers that can be manipulated, capabilities are actually cryptographically protected by hardware, right? So, like I said, Cambridge University has developed a prototype chip, and ARM is actually working to bring it to the market under the Morello series, and you can look up. And while the widespread adoption or mass scale adoption is still about 5 years away, Cherry really represents a paradigm shift in how we're looking at security vulnerabilities that can be prevented by hardware design, not just by software patches. Yep. Can we move to the next one, please? I think we've all heard about it. It's not something new, but artificial intelligence is really transforming the way we look at IoT security. It's a, a powerful defense and also a new attack vector, right? So that's the interesting part. So on the defense side, it has the capability to do threat detection, analyze behavior patterns across millions of devices simultaneously, right? And it's able to identify zero-day attacks by recognizing anomalous behaviors. So and we are also looking at some intelligent SOCs, right, or security operations centers, which leverage AI for automated incident response. That's another very interesting use case that we've seen. Now, on the threat side, adversaries are actually using artificial intelligence for automated exploitation, scanning for vulnerable devices, compromising them at scale, right? So what we have to do when it comes to AI is we have to protect these AI models, right? Because these AI models are critical assets throughout that device life cycle, right? So that's essentially, it requires combining the AI defenses with traditional security, right? We call it defense in depth. So we need AI, which is explainable and something that helps us understand the security decisions and not really get blinded by the algorithms. And critically, we must secure these AI models from data poisoning themselves, right? Yep.
Um, Thank you so much. I'm going to, I think, cut you off here, just because we are a little bit over time. And I suggest if we just do a very quick, maybe 5 minutes Q&A, if that is okay with you.
Well, so there's one thing I would just like to conclude my last slide because that's critical.
Of course. Of course, no worries.
It talks about the convergence of everything that we look at it today. So the last one, the key takeaway. I'll cover a bit of everything that we missed out. Yeah.
No worries, no worries.
Right. So looking at the next few years will be dominated by regulatory compliance wave. So between 25, 27, baseline security will shift from optional to mandatory. Organizations that haven't started will face serious challenges, right? Even to sell their products. They need CE markings, trust labels, so on and so forth. From 28 to 32, we will see that the post-quantum cryptography transition actually accelerate as quantum computing advances. Cherry-based platforms will begin commercial adoption, and blockchain integration hopefully will mature beyond pilot to production systems. And beyond 2033, we anticipate memory safe hardware becoming a standard in new devices. Quantum resistant cryptography will be there, mass adoption, of course, and then AI driven security operations managing billions of devices, right? But challenges remain. Legacy device problem, how do we secure device and can't be updated, supply chain complexity, and skills shortage, right? And that is why we have this gathering here, right? We need security professionals who understand not just software, but also the hardware, radio, and operational technology, and also understand how life cycle management work, right? So there are opportunities. Secure by default becomes a competitive differentiator. So with that, I rest my case. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. Thanks for your attention. And yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Sorry, I had to cut it short, but you can share the slides with the audience. And I think we lost some time because of the technical issues today.
Yeah,
my apologies to all the attendees today.
My apologies. Well, it's unfortunate when these things happen, but I guess that's we are not quite at the stage where we can have flawless across interactions. So very quick Q&A. I see one here which was quite far back up in the chat, so I've saved it. What are the main differences between securing consumer IoT and industrial IoT?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So let's take the example. Say you have a connected toaster, all right, and you have a connected DCS in an energy grid, right? So if you really look at one is the cybersecurity posture that you would have for each of these two devices, right? It's going to be very different. What happens when your toaster gets compromised? You will have a burnt bread, a loaf, right? But what if your DCS gets compromised? The entire grid is down, right? So you'll really have to look at starting, and I'll go back to what I spoke about in terms of hardware, software, radio, and lifecycle management. Let's start with hardware. I won't take much time. In a toaster, you really don't much. You don't really need too much of hardware countermeasures. You can do with username password. Maybe a certificate would do actually, but where do you store that? You can store it on flash, that's fine. But the moment you go to a DCS, right, you need a TPM 2.0 or a secure element, which is a secure enclave where you store your secrets. You need to have some kind of a mechanism where it's immune to side channel attacks, where nobody will be able to, or hackers will not be able to retrieve your secrets, right? Same software, you have to follow certain ways of coding. So there are a certain number of secure ways of coding. Also the tools that you use to code, right? And then of course there's pen testing that needs to be done. There is a lot of software testing that happens, right? All this is pretty much required for industrial. Another thing for industrial, if you really look at it today, consumer standards are not mandatory. They are, these are like best practices. So 303645, you can look up and you can pick up what you want for your device. But 62443, you have certification. So you need a certificate device. So we see vendors now, when they actually go and procure these industrial systems, they mandate what certification on what level of that certification the device need to be certified on. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And that was a really, really detailed answer. So thank you very much. We are quite a lot over time, so I think we'll leave it at that. So thank you so much. And apologies again to for the technical issues, but despite this, we had a really great lecture. So thank you very much, Amit Rao, for taking part in the school. I think we would love to, always have you back, and hopefully next time there can be a full uninterrupted session. So I'm
sure,
really,
Alexander. Thank you, and thank you all of you for your time and attention. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.